So, in today's episode of Brit and Poland, me and the folks have been to Gdansk. If you're not familiar with these two, with Norman and Christine,
Hello.
they've appeared in a couple of other videos. They've been kind enough to give some interviews. So we had a chat about their impressions of Poland, what they think about me living here, that kind of thing. And at the moment, we are wrapping up our holiday in Gdansk. So we've arrived here last Saturday, and tomorrow they have a taxi at about 3:30 in the morning. I have a train at about 5 in the morning to get back to Warsaw. Timings are going to be fun, so we're not going to sleep much tonight. And it's been a pretty packed week, so for sure we're pretty tired now. But we're just going to do a bit of a retrospective on the holiday, and you can get some additional thoughts on Poland that are unbiased compared to me. So I guess first question is, what's your impression of Gdansk?
I think it's lovely. I know that it was almost destroyed in 1945 when the Russians came, which I think is horrendous. They obviously have no idea about historic buildings, but I think the way they've reconstructed it, so a lot of the facades and things look the same, it may be totally different inside, is lovely. And yet they've also got some very sympathetic modern architecture, which echoes the sort of zigzag shapes of the roof lines and things, but it gives clean modern lines. So I think it's very beautiful. It must have been incredible for 1945.
What do you think, Dad?
Well, I was quite surprised by, first of all, the size of it and how modern it looks, and how it doesn't seem to be any of the kind of poor areas that you seem to get in a lot of English cities this size, because it's probably about the size of Manchester. So if it's about 400,000 or 500,000, that's a big city.
Yeah, you haven't seen many homeless people in comparison to some places.
No, there have been a couple selling flowers on the streets, but I don't know what that really means or represents. In terms of the architecture, the 17th century facades of the warehouses are very impressive and really give an indication of the former economic structure of the city, how it stored up the food, the grain presumably, from the immediate areas. And when we drove down to Malbork, it was quite impressive how large a flat area that was obviously dedicated to corn growing.
Yeah, because we learned interestingly that a lot of this is like under sea level, this area, and they were actually employing the Dutch to help manage that, because of course they're very familiar with that.
I had no idea they had boulder land around here as well.
Yeah, I mean the Dutch were employed in East Anglia, in the Lincolnshire Fens, and to a certain extent in the Somerset Levels, which are both very prone to flooding and canalised to reduce the levels of flooding. You still get flooding in Somerset, for instance, but that's where that came from, and it's quite impressive. Just looking at the sizes of those, like 8-storey warehouses, how much and how many there are of them, how much of a wealth there must have been in the trade. And we know that Gdansk was one of the cities of the Hanseatic League, so they were involved in European trade with England from quite early on. I think we saw it was 14th century. So that certainly explains the wealth behind it.
Yeah,
because it's a pity. Sorry, it's a pity in a way that we don't see more early buildings. They all seem to date furthest back to the 17th century. 1609 was.
I think anything older, they were just fragments, really.
Yeah.
They may be hidden behind other buildings.
There may well be. It might be like Oxford, where all you see is 17th century frontages, but there are a couple of much older buildings behind.
Because while we've been in Gdansk, we've been doing a lot of walking, a lot of exploring, been to a lot of museums, a lot of restaurants. I know with the museums, they looked beautiful, especially places like Artist Court. They're wonderful places to see, but the problem we had was perhaps they didn't feel like museums as such. They didn't really teach us a lot about the history.
I don't know if we've been unlucky, because I think the Archaeology Museum was closed, but there was nothing about the sort of general history of Gdansk. Or you learned a little bit in the Rathaus Museum about the history of the Rathaus and the Teutonic Knights. And there was some wonderful furniture that was made in Gdansk. So I've learned a little bit about the fact they made grand pianos and beautiful, very elaborately carved furniture in the 19th century. But we didn't really get a general history of Gdansk from there, which is rather disappointing.
It was.
In Krakow, there's a wonderful local history museum.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, like different parts of Poland you have like different kinds of museums, and Katowice they had some really good history. In Warsaw they had very good history. But in Gdansk it feels more like a showroom.
Yes, I can see that.
You get isolated aspects of what is really quite a complex history with lots of peoples in like a tribal movement, moving west, moving east, and it's very difficult to grasp the overall picture.
Yeah, but I think we did find there were some museums that stood out. So like you loved the Amber Museum, didn't you, Mum?
Yeah. Well, Amber was one of the main reasons I wanted to come to Gdansk, apart from the fact it's one of the few places you can travel to from Newcastle Airport. I didn't really want to change planes anywhere. But I've always been interested in Amber, since I was a child, I think. And the Amber Museum, which is very new, did an incredible job of trying to explain how the amber was actually made. And to think it's 40 million years old is just incredible. They haven't got very many old pieces in the museum, but they've got some spectacular modern pieces and things. And the gift shop has some incredible bits.
Yeah,
I must admit, I spent rather more than I should have done. I remember this.
It's all coming out now.
Yeah, I was going to say, I bought this, something I've never seen before, exquisite butterflies, which are basically made of amber, but then they've been very delicately painted with the features of the butterfly. Some are very crude, with just sort of black lines. I thought those were too heavy. But I got a beautiful peacock butterfly. And this morning in Sopot, I got a lovely piece of green amber, which is in a beautifully modern setting. And it's got lots of little bubbles in it, which apparently are air bubbles. And I've never seen one quite like that. So it's quite magical.
Yes. So Mum bought lots of amber.
Of course, I went to the amber workshop.
Oh, yes.
I learned how to do it myself.
Yeah, tell the people a bit about the what did you do in this workshop?
That was organised by the local tours by locals. And I had this delightful guide who I really liked. And she had brilliant English. And she took me into this little underground workshop, which is only half the size of this room. And there's this delightful craftsman. And it's so sad. He must be in his 70s, I would think. And he's got no one to pass it on to. The younger people just aren't interested, which I think is an absolute tragedy. And he's all set up with quite primitive tools, obviously electric. But we selected a little piece of amber, and he showed me how to make it a more regular shape, so it was easy to put a silver shape around it. And I actually put it on the polisher myself to do that. But I was able to polish up part of the surface. I was a bit cagey about how I did, because I didn't want to damage it. So he sort of did the finishing for me. Then he mounted it in a silver mount. And we spent an hour and a bit doing that. And then I had the great privilege, normally I think you just get one piece, but I got two. I was able to make a bracelet, which is great fun. So I think he appreciated the fact that I do make my own jewellery using different techniques.
And Dad, what about you? Were there any museums that stood out?
Well, the biggest fort in Europe, which turned out to be the largest brick fort in Europe,
Malbork, yeah,
was unfortunately a bit of a disappointment, and there was a lot to see, and it went through in quite a pace. But I think if it had been more structured, I would have followed it.
Yeah, I mean, just to put that in context, so we had like a private tour that we arranged because, we wanted to make the travel easier, and so it included a guide. And I mean, for me, I'm used to, let's say, the Polish accent on English, so I was fine with that. I could understand what she was saying, but we kind of, we went through the castle, and it was perhaps as Dad was saying, a little bit rushed.
Whistle stop, I think I'd call it.
Yeah, and I feel we didn't quite see everything, but we saw most of it.
I suspect that the lower part that we didn't see, which was the servants' quarters, may not have been open to the public anyway.
That's the thing with these places; they're always chopping and changing what's
I
open.
haven't had a chance to see the guidebook yet. See what's supposed to have been open.
But Dad, what did you particularly enjoy?
But the thing I really enjoyed today was the what looked like a sort of 9th century fort at Sopot.
Sopot, yeah. So we went to the archaeological museum in Sopot, and so we saw a few artifacts, you could say, but then behind that you go up onto a hill, which I guess is the site of the original fort, and they have a reconstruction. It seems to be under construction still, and we seem to be out of season. But it was something a bit different,
Yeah, I mean, this seasonability aspect of it, which made it look a bit odd, was that you could see photographs of people, for instance, in a group around a fire, and there was a fire actually there, but there are no groups there, and some of the rooms, the stables, blocks, were obviously for the public, were not actually open to the public, and they seem to be doing a lot of tidying up and organising, as if we'd come at the wrong time, which was a shame.
There were 2 proper interiors, weren't there?
Yeah.
Where you've got huts with sort of beds and things like that in them.
Yeah.
And they got a blacksmith's forge,
Yeah.
and they got a loom
Yeah.
in operation.
Yeah.
They were obviously doing things because as we came back, somebody had been maybe dyeing some rectangles of hessian, and they were all put out to dry over a railing. So it sounds as though they're in the process of doing things.
Yeah.
So the museum didn't really seem to have objects in, as though that's work in progress as well.
Yeah, I think that one of the problems when you travel in Poland is if you're kind of slightly out of season, because in Poland season is more kind of late June, July, August sort of time for a lot of these places, then not everything is perhaps ready, because they prepare it for when they have the most tourists. But God, we encountered a lot of tour groups though, didn't we? There were a lot of kids.
Absolutely.
I think what, I wouldn't say ruined, but made several of the museums quite a disappointment, was that they were used to lots of children going around, and we must have seen like 30, 40, 50, 100 children going around. It kept stopping our progress, and the guides or the people in charge of the place were not really interested in talking to anybody, because basically there seemed to be no one to talk to, and therefore we've missed a lot of opportunity of grasping.
I think yeah, I mean mostly the people there are more focused on just making sure that nobody does anything stupid or breaks anything.
Yeah.
And also I think in general the kind of museum workers tend not to have that higher level of English.
Yeah.
They obviously speak some English, and they were helpful when we needed help, but I don't know if it's really their role here to guide people, because I know
to guard the objects, I think.
Exactly, and just to keep an eye on things.
Yeah.
Because you also like the National Museum of oh my God, my brain's gone. Yeah, we're all very tired. The Maritime Museum. You thought that was pretty good.
Yes, that's the one on the island.
Yes.
Yeah, that was very good, and it wasn't for the fact that we were delayed by not being able to get to the your
workshop.
Your workshop. I think we could have spent another hour in there certainly to advantage, and that was quite impressive, seeing the history of all the maritime thing. I think that and the ethnographic. I think it's the ethnographic, because we've been to so many, I get them slightly mixed up, where you see the movement of the peoples just as an aspect.
Oh no, you're thinking of the Emigration Museum in
It's
Gdynia.
the immigration, yeah.
That was spectacular, by the way.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, it's like you get to learn about basically the Polish people that throughout history who have moved abroad. People like Chopin, for example, and had the more modern history, like people who moved away because of the war, the countries that they went to, the kind of conditions they had. It was a very, very well put together museum.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing I found interesting, just on the street, there were a whole series of large blown up panels all about the Kashubians.
Mm.
And we found a Kashubian restaurant to have a meal in. And I thought that was very interesting too.
Oh,
I
yeah.
was surprised they weren't in the Ethnographic Museum, which was a bit of a disaster, really.
It was a very small museum.
Yeah, very
Yeah,
very
because
fashionable.
we went all the way to Olivska Park, which is like right the other side of Gdansk on the outskirts. Lovely park, and we found an amazing cathedral there. But the Ethnographic Museum, which was the main target of this trip, was a little bit of a disappointment. But we did go to the Olivia Star kind of complex, and so we sat on this giant viewing platform and had a nice lunch there.
36 stories high.
Something like that,
Yeah.
yeah. I think we were on floor 32 or something.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, it's pretty high up.
Yeah,
Mm.
so that was nice. But yeah, talking about food, because we went to a lot of restaurants. So I know one of our favourites was this Browaria place, and it's a Polish restaurant, but they had the staff dressed as like German, like
Yeah, waitresses in the South German, because I know the address because when I was in Münster, I think it was, that's how they dressed in some of the restaurants in southern Germany.
yeah, kind of Bavarian style.
Yeah.
But this restaurant also boasts, because it's a brewery as well, it boasts the best beer in Poland, and they had a number of awards to showcase that. But we had very good food there as well,
Yeah,
didn't we?
It's very good.
Lovely
Okay.
asparagus menu.
Yeah, I don't think any of the restaurants, you've got such a wide choice here as well. I don't think any restaurants we could really complain about. You know,
Well, I
none
did,
of them, but,
again, as a vegetarian, I did find it a little bit difficult to find interesting vegetarian food.
Mm.
And the same as restaurants in England, I found there weren't enough vegetables.
Mm.
I was quite shocked. You would get maybe 10 prawns or something and a little bit of sauce to go with them and not very much else.
Yeah,
I'm not used to eating single things together. I like them all sort of mixed up.
yeah, and I mean, the food in terms of cost, it's more expensive than I'm used to in Warsaw for sure. I guess the average meal was costing us about 250 zloty,
200, yeah.
so about
Yeah.
£50 for 3 people, which
Yeah,
is
the-
which could, you know, and this was like normally a main meal and like drinks.
well,
So
yeah,
you know, in the UK that would be reasonable.
Yeah, the Greek meal was 404 zlotys.
But we went to
About
this
80 quid.
this Greek restaurant, which was lovely, really nice food. But we had starters and things and
We
extra
had,
drinks
yeah,
and
afters as well.
some dessert. So
It was a lovely meal.
it was,
And
and
to
I
be
like.
honest, it's not that much more than you'd expect to pay in Newcastle.
No, that's it. I mean, it's perhaps not as cheap as you'd expect Poland to be, but I think it's partly inflation, but also partly like this part of because it's so touristy.
It's very touristy, yeah. Yeah, people go around in groups, yeah. Groups of 30 and 40.
But I don't think they were sort of tourist groups on coach tours. I think they were school children groups mostly.
There were mostly school children because they don't seem to have any schools in Poland. But
No, I mean we
Going
saw
to that.
some hen parties as well.
yeah,
Maybe some stag parties. I think I heard a few lads being a bit rowdy a couple of times, but not so much. I don't think it's really a
I
stag
think those
party
are mostly
place.
English people. Yeah.
Yes,
And,
yeah.
Accent.
Yeah, we had a lot of English people out here,
Mm.
actually. I was surprised. Because you get
Yeah,
a lot of people coming here from like Scandinavia because the
Because
alcohol's
I
cheap.
haven't heard the Scandinavian accents so much.
Yeah, true.
Maybe I wouldn't recognise them from Polish, but
Maybe. And they're
Mm.
quiet,
Mm.
so
Yeah.
maybe you didn't hear them talking.
But it's interesting that I heard we had very few American accents. There's one today, and I think that's basically all I remember.
Yeah, he kind of dominated the restaurant.
Yeah. But there went like from the Far East, you know, in Oxford, you used to get lots of Chinese and Japanese. You know, they'd force you off the pavement, you know,
Mm.
because they didn't realise what it was for.
we don't know how much COVID's affected things like that, because we haven't been in Oxford since then.
That's right.
Probably back to normal by now, I'd thought.
Yeah. I would have thought it was back to normal. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we're getting off topic a bit, but like, is there any final thoughts about this trip?
It's been very varied. Next time I should make sure I have a very comfortable pair of walking shoes.
Yeah, you struggled a bit with the cobbles, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah,
Women's
that's
shoes tend to
true.
have much thinner soles than men's, I think.
Mm.
Mm.
Yes. But no, it's been a wonderful week. We should be very sad to leave for many reasons.
Yeah. Well, it's nice to see the outlying districts like Ulia, with the tower, and Gdynia and Sopot, and
Sopot, yeah.
whatever it's called, and that castle Malbork, and which are well outside central Gdansk.
Yeah.
Well, another highlight, I think, was on the trip to Malbork, we had a very interesting driver.
Yes.
And I was talking about sort of folk life and things, but about how my great-great-grandfather had farmed on poultry land in Lincolnshire. And he took us for a very brief stop outside a fantastic farmhouse, which had a sort of porch set on enormous wooden pillars. And he was saying that the grain was all stored on the first floor. And I think there was sort of hallways you went in, and you could go round from one room to another on the ground floor. So presumably if there was a flood, and that's why the grain was stored upstairs, then they would somehow manage to get the furniture and things upstairs. But obviously the grain was what was most valuable to them.
Well,
But
you
it
get
has
that
its
with,
fusion.
you get like on those stone paddle stools, or whatever they're called in England, the barns. The grain is raised not only from the damp but also from the rats.
Yeah.
Who, if you just left the door open, they'd say thank you very much and walk in and consume a lot. But if you put them on these saddle stones,
Yeah.
stones, then
But you wouldn't have
they're-
those up on a first floor.
And anyway,
Sorry.
we're getting off topic. So, I think.
Cut that bit out.
Do you have any final thoughts, Dad?
No, I mean, it's one of those things that because it's quite a difference in culture, it's a bit difficult to accustom, to assimilate. So it's possible we won't better get a picture of it for another
But
month or so.
what were some of the differences you're talking about?
Well, the size of Gdansk was the thing that really struck me, and how sophisticated it was. The fact that there's a little bit rough areas around the hotel, for instance, where they're still
Construction.
redeveloping.
Yeah.
And obviously some of the cities in redevelopment, but then you get that a lot in the UK as well. No, I was really impressed by the place, and the other places like Sopot,
Sopot, Gdynia, Malbork.
which keep changing their names.
We haven't mentioned Merchant's House that was rather special.
Which was the merchants? Oh,
In
the
the middle
Dom
of Gdansk.
something. Yeah, that was rather nice.
It gave you an idea of how
Oh, yeah.
house worked. Again, it's been mostly rebuilt, but it was left to Gdansk, really. It was left so that in a will, so it mustn't be changed. And it was set out as it would have been in the 18th century. There was some lovely furniture, and some of the wall paintings. They painted beautiful flowers and insects and creatures and things all over the panelling, which was absolutely beautiful. And it showed you how the family sort of lived at the front, and then there was a sort of passageway area which led to another area at the back, which was more like the service quarters, where they'd reconstructed the kitchen and rooms like that, which is very interesting indeed.
Yeah. Well, the kitchens are quite relevant to what we're doing back in Northumberland, which is we're a sort of guide to that whole.
Indelible. Indeed.
Indelible, yeah.
Cool. But I think we can probably wrap things up there. So
Okay.
thank you both very much for giving me your time for the video, and it's been an absolutely lovely trip.
Yeah.
You know, we'll have to think about our next potential trip, whether we go around Poland again, or if we
We'll
go
wait till we
to
get some
Budapest or whatever, wherever we decide to go.
More money.
Yeah, well, yeah, maybe we can find some cheaper ways next. I think because 90% of the money went on food,
Yeah.
basically, didn't it? So there are for sure cheaper places. I mean, even in Warsaw, it would be cheaper going out than this, if we can get to Warsaw.
Yeah.
Okay, but I think that will do it. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this interesting, and stay tuned for plenty more videos. Do zobaczenia.
Bye.